didn't know where to go. Oh,
Keller was there, Phil. That's kind of his job, so.
I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to get anything out of this. I just want to hear what you're saying. And I know, you know, Seizures is good.
I just want to see if I got the latest on our folks here.
Hey,
yeah, Jason's doing a letter right now, and Rowan's yeah, absolutely. We'll do.
you know, who sent it?
Jason's drafting. By all.
Just make sure.
Absolutely. They're gonna get that for a billion.
They're just sending a message, everybody knows what's right.
Yeah.
It looks so stupid, 2 days after he turned.
I know. Kind of embarrassing.
To them.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me double check on
I didn't hear all you said, John. I didn't hear all that you said. You said you may not take anything down.
Well, no, I didn't say that. I didn't read and they didn't read anything.
Okay, sorry, we all got it.
I was there for the quarter range. He made it 50. Most of them felt like they already know.
Anytime you want to bring
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Approximately 1 year ago, a partnership was forged between various law enforcement agencies with the singular purpose of trying to eliminate violent gun crime by slicing into the underbelly of the illegal narcotics trade that runs rampant throughout Lycoming County, and specifically the city of Williamsport. This alliance among law enforcement charged with undertaking this difficult task included members of the United States Attorney's Office, the FBI, the Pennsylvania State Police, the Lycoming County Narcotics Enforcement Unit, the Williamsport Bureau of Police, and the Lycoming County District Attorney's Office. Representatives of these various agencies stand here today and include David Freed, United States Attorney for the Middle District of Pennsylvania, Sean Noel of the FBI, Captain Shadle of the Pennsylvania State Police, Troop F in Toursville, Lieutenant Gregory Watson, Supervisor of the Pennsylvania State Police, Troop F Crimes Section, Williamsport's Mayor, Derek Slaughter, Chief Damon Hagan of the Williamsport Bureau of Police, Lycoming County Commissioners, Scott Metzger, Tony Masser, and Rick Miravito, Chief Detective Michael Simpler of the Lycoming County District Attorney's Office, Chief Ed McCoy of Lycoming County Adult Probation, Chief David Goodwin of the Lycoming County Juvenile Probation Office, and finally, Sheriff Lusk, who is unavailable to be here today, sends his regards and his support. Unfortunately, although geographically far removed from our metropolitan neighbors of Philadelphia, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, New York City, and various cities located in New Jersey, Lycoming County is considered a crossroads for the illegal distribution of narcotics flowing to and from these larger areas. The distribution of illegal narcotics is a profitable enterprise for those choosing to dip their toes into these dangerous waters. Approximately 1 decade ago, a loose-knit group of juveniles living in Williamsport received some cash and a phone from a known drug dealer at the time and provided with a very basic business model: buy and sell illegal narcotics. Over time, as this loose-knit collection of juveniles peddled their illegal wares on the streets of Williamsport, the group grew in numbers, strength, and developed new techniques to avoid detection by police. Despite the best efforts of law enforcement, the group formed a non-traditional gang called the 400. The 400 refers to the 400 block of Louisa Street and represents the area where several of the founding members resided at that time. As with any lucrative business enterprise, an hierarchical structure was established in order to accommodate the increasing demand of illegal narcotics. If you imagine in your mind's eye a pyramid, at the top of the pyramid is the individuals responsible for facilitating the transportation of bulk heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, and crack cocaine into our area, where same is then directed to be repackaged for daily distribution. The individuals at the top of the pyramid also often direct those farther down the pyramid, referred to as runners, to deliver the individually packaged baggies to buyers and users. Despite the best efforts of this county's law enforcement to disrupt this illegal enterprise, the 400 gang has continuously maintained a presence in this county's backyard for years. Also, despite the best efforts of law enforcement, due to the lucrative nature of the 400 gang enterprise, the gang's membership continued to increase. Whether it was a result of infighting, greed, or the inability to keep pace with demand, various younger members of the 400 gang formed another gang referred to as the 600. The 600 gang consisted, at least originally, of members residing largely in the area of the 600 block of Locust Street. Sadly, other spin-off gangs have recently emerged in the city, known as the H Block Gang and the BG 150 Gang. Make no mistake that regardless of name, the common purpose shared by all gangs mentioned herein is the distribution of illegal narcotics in Lycoming County. It is important to note that in addition to the sale of illegal narcotics, a parallel, disconcerting observation by law enforcement is that the increase in gang activity has translated to a realized increase in the number of shootings and homicides experienced in the city and county during the last several years. This surge in violent gun crime is a byproduct of increased gang activity, as well as other individuals actively involved in the distribution of illegal narcotics. Intelligence collected by law enforcement prior to and during this investigation clearly evidences that gang members do illegally possess firearms. Social media profiles for a number of the individuals named in this investigation illustrates the pervasive and flagrant illegal possession of firearms among gang members. The possession of firearms by not only gang members, but other individuals engaged in the sale of illegal narcotics poses serious concerns for law enforcement on many levels. Specifically, the level of awareness required by officers when encountering individuals suspected of possessing and or distributing illegal narcotics is heightened in all situations, as law enforcement must assume that the individual may also possess a deadly weapon. The circulation of these weapons on the black market without any record of legal transfer subjects officers to significant risk, as well as the general public. In short, the combination of guns, drugs, and gangs is a recipe for violence that has no place in Williamsport or Lycoming County. These arrests are solely the result of law enforcement's uncompromising commitment to make this county a safe and welcoming environment for its residents and visitors. Years of sweat equity by the State Police, Narcotics Enforcement Unit, and Williamsport Bureau of Police in the form of undercover operations, surveillance, prior arrests and search warrants, meetings with witnesses and confidential sources, the monitoring of social media accounts, and interfacing with multiple agencies serve as the basis of the federal indictments against the individuals now being prosecuted by the federal government. Local members of the State Police and the Narcotics Enforcement Unit shouldered the weight of these voluminous investigations that comprise the basis of the federal prosecutions and ultimately resulted in the arrests yesterday of some of the most prolific gang-involved drug dealers and persons in possession of dangerous weapons. It is anticipated that additional federal indictments will be sought by the U.S. Attorney's Office against other similarly situated individuals who were apprehended yesterday and or continue to be located by law enforcement. The unrelenting prosecution of these indictments by U.S. Attorney David Freed's office and the FBI was and continues to be instrumental in holding accountable some of the most dangerous gang members in this county. In addition to the 6 federal warrants filed by the federal government, the Lycoming County Narcotics Unit, which includes 2 members of the Williamsport Bureau of Police and members of the state police, filed 61 criminal complaints and arrests this week. The service of the warrants are the culmination of countless man-hours expended by the Narcotics Enforcement Unit. Some of the warrants include individuals that may later be adopted and prosecuted by U.S. Attorney Freed's office. The majority of the NU warrants involve non-gang related individuals who delivered a variety of illegal narcotics over the course of approximately 6 months. As you likely recall, previously I have made numerous comments that criminal activity never ceased despite the stay-at-home directives issued by the governor regarding COVID-19. The arrest warrants filed this week represent the continued due diligence of law enforcement during the height of COVID-19 to surveil, track, and disrupt the chain of distribution of illegal narcotics from seller to user. The significant value to the residents of Lycoming County of continued disruption can never be overstated, especially during the COVID pandemic, as this county realized 18 drug overdose deaths between March 1 through mid-July. Please understand that despite the ongoing laborious efforts of the county's Narcotic Enforcement Unit, PSP, the FBI, and the U.S. Attorney's Office, it is important to note that yesterday's roundup would not have been possible but for the calculated and collaborative efforts of various agencies pulling together their resources in order to safely and efficiently attempt to serve the 6 federal warrants and 61 Narcotics Enforcement Unit warrants. Approximately 45 state troopers were involved, including drug and bomb detection canines, and both PSP East and West CERT teams that are coordinated by Sergeant Mark Rowlands, 15 officers from the Williamsport Bureau of Police, as well as the Williamsport CERT team that's coordinated by agents Jeremy Brown and Justin Snyder. 2 teams from the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force Unit that's coordinated by U.S. Deputy Marshal Matt Person and PSP Trooper Daniel DiNucci. 15 sheriff's deputies, and utilization of the sheriff's vehicles and transport vans was critical for the transport of anyone apprehended. 20 adult probation officers, 7 juvenile probation officers, approximately 15 to 20 FBI personnel, all county detectives, the DEA, Old Lycoming Police and Fire Departments, Central Processing Units, and the Lycoming County Communication Center. The combined resources of these agencies resulted, and I apologize, I forgot to put this up earlier. In the following. The arrest of 30 individuals as a result of the filed NEU warrants. The arrest of 3 out of the 6 federal warrants. 12 search warrants were executed yesterday alone that yield the seizure of 3 semi-automatic rifles and 1 long rifle for a total of 4 rifles. 3 semi-automatic pistols in addition to 2 revolvers for a total of 5 handguns. Approximately $21,000 in cash and varying amounts of heroin, fentanyl, crack, cocaine, marijuana, and assorted pills. Finally, a search warrant that is related to an ongoing investigation was executed in the city Sunday evening, where another handgun was recovered that is suspected to be the weapon involved in a recent shooting. The photographs located to my left depict the guns and cash seized yesterday. Make no mistake, the magnitude of yesterday's criminal roundup does not mark the conclusion of investigations, surveillance, and arrests. Investigations continue. Surveillance is underway as we speak, and additional arrests will inevitably be made. Law enforcement alone has shouldered and will continue to shoulder the burden of disrupting these illegal, clandestine drug operations. The term thin blue line is a misnomer in the context of law enforcement's ongoing efforts to disrupt the distribution of illegal narcotics and guns. There is nothing thin standing between the distribution of illegal narcotics and guns and the safety and welfare of the community. What is standing there is a blue line, proud to serve, proud to perform, and proud to protect. At this time, I want to introduce the United States Attorney for the Middle District of Pennsylvania, David Freed.
Thanks, Ryan. Good afternoon. It really is a pleasure and an honor to be here. I think it's appropriate that the county commissioners are here. I'm a former district attorney myself in Cumberland County in the Harrisburg area for many years. and the support of elected commissioners is vital. And I know some of the history of the Narcotics Enforcement Unit here and the strong support that the DA at the time received from the Commissioner's Office in order to stand that unit up. And it's very impressive, to see the work that unit has done along with its partners in both state and federal law enforcement. I want to amplify a few points that the district attorney made. The gang activity that he spoke of, neighborhood gangs or affinity groups, not necessarily Crips and Bloods or MS-13 or the gangs you may have heard of. That is often what gang activity looks like in the Middle District of Pennsylvania, whether you're talking about York, Pennsylvania, Harrisburg, Williamsport, Wilkes-Barre, Hazleton. It's often affinity groups as it was developed here. And they have many of the same hallmarks of highly organized gangs, hierarchical structure, and a pyramid type structure where it's everything from the people at the top to the runners on the street. This operation was directed at that whole pyramid. Not only the distributors at the top, but everybody down to the street level runners. Drug dealing, as you can see, this poster shows it better than anything can. Drug dealing is inherently violent activity. There is no such thing as a non-violent drug dealer. Drugs and guns go hand in hand. Guns are an essential tool of a drug dealer. All you have to do is look at that to see it. The partnership that we enjoy, partnerships we enjoy all over the Middle District, you can see that those partnerships are particularly strong here. Think about this. All the work that went into this operation included looking very hard at the cases and a considered and thoughtful decision by the FBI, the District Attorney's Office, the Assistant U.S. Attorney who's involved in the case, deciding which of the cases should go federal. Not everyone is ripe for federal prosecution. We also don't swoop in and take cases and pick and choose. We work together with the local authorities in order to choose what cases would be appropriate to go federal. An important point to remember there is, what do the guidelines look like? If the sentencing guidelines are about similar, we're probably going to leave that case at the state level. But if the guidelines are substantially higher or their involvement in the organization is greater, we'll look to take that case federally. That's the kind of relationship that we've had here in the past. We've certainly had it since District Attorney Gardner has taken over, and we look to grow that in the future. He deserves to be commended for his willingness to work together with all of the different law enforcement groups that you can see up here, as well as the federal authorities. There's no ego. There's enough room for everybody. The district attorney is doing his job by prosecuting cases and also sending cases to the best place that considered opinions think that they should be for prosecution. So as the district attorney said, we've been able to apprehend 3 of the 6 folks that we sought criminal complaints against. We will be seeking indictments in a future grand jury proceeding here in Williamsport, and as this case goes on, the potential is certainly there for us to seek more federal indictments depending on how the case goes. These are the kind of operations that you can expect with the cooperation of the federal authorities and the local authorities. We will not stand for the drug dealing, and we will not stand for the gun violence wherever it takes place. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending. If you have some generalized questions, I may take a few, but there's a lot of ongoing investigations that may preclude detail.
Just to mention that this roundup yesterday, and I guess continues today, will continue. And you mentioned that it involves everybody from top to bottom on the pyramid. Majority of those that were arrested have been arrested. I guess we're probably talking about 30 now. Where are most of those, would you say, sir, or you, in that pyramid?
The federal government obviously is going to absorb the criminals, the criminal activity that is the most heinous, that being the real heavy involvement with gangs, guns, and the distribution of bulk amounts of narcotics. Most of the individuals that the narcotics unit filed on will fall either in mid-tier to low tier on the pyramid.
Can you comment on the wrong house? I understand officers visited and smashed a window and it was not the right home? Can you
I will
comment?
say unequivocally that no window was disturbed, in addition to no personal property was disturbed. Officers arrived at that location pursuant to the most recent information that we had received regarding the whereabouts of the individual being targeted. Being there no breach of the house, and after ascertaining that the individual was not home, officers left. The individual was ascertained shortly thereafter.
You mentioned the loose group from about a decade ago of juveniles. Do you have any comment on that loose group? And many of the names that have been released so far are former student athletes. Is that a concern of yours, that this is something that they turn to as opposed to other paths in their life in that group 10 years ago?
Obviously, anyone that chooses on their own volition to engage in the legal distribution of narcotics is a concern, not only to law enforcement, but should also be a concern for the general public. I assume that kind of at the core of your question is what, if anything, can be done to steer them in a different direction. That's a community-based answer, and it cannot fall solely on the shoulders of law enforcement. Unfortunately, by the time they get to the level where they're on law enforcement's radar, they're typically too deep to recover.
Ryan, can I address that?
Yes, sir.
That very good answer to the question. I think it's a great question. And I read in one of the stories today about a former pretty recent student athlete, which hits home with me. I mean, I used to go to the Pete White's basketball camp back in the day. I played in the high school there 30 years ago when I was a high school student. I come from Cumberland County, where Carlisle High School won 4 straight state championships, and a bunch of those guys that were on those teams got in trouble later on when I was DA. What an operation like this does, though, it seems to me, is taking the top level off and appropriately prosecuting them federally leaves all sorts of options open for those mid and lower level people. County law enforcement, county probation, county corrections is much better suited to affect a change in their lives than it would be if we just took everybody here and made them federal. I think that's one of the beauties of an operation like this. Because we could charge everybody federally. I mean, selling drugs, no matter what amount, that's a federal offense. We choose to have certain thresholds about cases that we take. But in a case like this, the DA said it best, there are community problems that demand community solutions, but there are opportunities that can be created by that involvement in the criminal justice system if it hasn't gotten too far.
The top three, the 3 people that you arrested yesterday, 3 of the 6, are they considered really top of the pyramid or close to the pyramid as opposed to the mid-level?
For the purposes of the organization, this operation, yes.
Okay. And is there ages or addresses where they lived at their homes and their ages, date of birth? Is that public record?
Not yet.
at this
That's
time?
all sealed at this point.
That's all sealed. One other question, I talked with a retired officer today who happened to see the list of some of those. We ran some of the list, and tomorrow we'll run the full list, the rest of the list. He said to me, he's a retired officer, been on the department in law enforcement for 30 years. He says, Phil, I read these names. There's nothing new to a lot of these names. Most of these names have already been through the system on drugs. Is that an accurate statement?
I would say a large majority usually have. It doesn't, I can't speak with any degree of specificity because I haven't put the rap sheets on all of them, but it doesn't sound like a misplaced statement. Put it that way.
That you would say a large percentage of them have already been through the system on drug offenses or other offenses?
I would specifically say drug offenses, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were through the system on other offenses.
And is there a better way that, anything that society can do? I mean, you guys are doing, you men and women in law enforcement are doing the best that we possibly can. But obviously, 30-some people have been taken off the street. We have warrants now for another 25 or 30. Once they're sort of locked up and gone, is there a pecking system or a pecking order that those taken off the street are easily replaced within days, weeks?
Unfortunately, if history proves itself correct, what has occurred is a vacuum has been created by the removal of these individuals and hopeful strict sanction thereof. At some point, others will replace them, and at some point, they too will be arrested.
So in essence, it's an endless battle.
Correct. Unfortunately, it really starts at a young age. Education, I can't stress how important that is to educate the youth regarding the downfalls and the pitfalls of going down this road.
Well, the choices people make.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who was first, Mr. Stout.
Well, yeah, you know, obviously this is gonna have a lot of impact downstream for your office. And just recently you've been able to start jury trials again. Has there been some planning on how this is all going to fall so that you don't have the backlog that you worked so hard to deal with?
It's an excellent question. Unfortunately, there comes a time, regardless of purge of any backlog, that ongoing criminal conduct cannot be ignored. The individuals that have already been arrested, and we anticipate who will be arrested yet, will be prosecuted accordingly, regardless of any backlog issues or concerns.
You touched briefly on it, but is there any indication of gang recruitment happening, like at the local high schools, or to what extent are these gangs actively recruiting local youths?
As far as active recruitment, I don't have an answer for that standing here today. I will say you that the numbers, regardless of law enforcement efforts to intercede or intervene, the numbers continue to increase. And as a result of that, we get different gangs, different affiliations. I think it's strongly inferred from that that there must be some type of active or aggressive recruitment efforts of these gang members.
What's the youngest age of an involved person in one of these gangs?
I don't have that information available. Thank you all for coming.
Hey, game 3, right? Yes, I am. One guy won't be playing, I can tell you that.
We're gonna do 5.
Should make a sign.
Oh, I'm glad